Welcome back, everybody, to the RacePlazaMedia podcast episode 15. My name is Milan.
My name is Pia.
And today we're going to be talking about the F1 race in Silverstone, as well as the ELMS race, 4 hours of Imola.
Correct.
So let's get right into the F1 race.
Yes.
So we watched the qualifying highlights.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big thing that happened in qualifying is that we had Colapinto crash out in Q1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. I think that's the big thing that happened was definitely Colapinto's crash, which is just so devastating because he doesn't have a secure seat right now, and his season hasn't been going great. I mean, it's okay, but I'm sure he wants the season to go better.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so starting off qualifying in Silverstone with a crash is just not great.
And then I think he is on a race-to-race contract at this point. So, yeah.
So that's a little bit of a bummer. But the other thing I wanted to bring out or mention for qualifying is that there was maybe the slightest, tiniest chance that Hamilton could have been on the front row.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
at least on like third position, so second row, because he was having an excellent qualifying, especially Q3. There was times where he was on the top of the overall timing list, but then, however, on his very last push lap, he
made a mistake.
in the last turn onto the finish straight, which was just took away a little bit of his time, which was just such a bummer because Silverstone is just such an important track for him, of course, as a British man, but then also, or British person, but then also just because of his history at the track. I mean, he has had so many wins there. He's
9.
And 13 times he's been on the podium there.
13 consecutive years.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, that's crazy. So, I mean, I was hoping that he would have a good weekend there. However, I was not overly optimistic just because of there's the difference of, like, obviously you're great at Silverstone and you're obviously a 7-time world champion, almost 8, and then there's just the car,
Yeah, of course.
him and the car just don't quite click yet. It's getting better. They're having ups and downs, but then of course going into the race now, speaking not going into it, but like it ended up being a mixed weather condition race with rain, and of course Hamilton is excellent in the rain typically, but from what he was saying afterwards, also like both him and Leclerc ended up struggling with the Ferrari in the rainy conditions.
Yeah, and I think it's also a thing with having like that one qualifying lap.
Yeah.
And then I think overall, just over race pace, even if it would have been like quote unquote perfect conditions, so no rain, I think the McLarens are just really, really fast.
Yes.
It would have been very tricky to keep them behind, but like just qualifying in the top 3 would have been really awesome.
Well, not only that, but I think there was maybe a small chance for him to maybe end up on the podium. But I wasn't as delusional to say that he would win the race, just because the way we know how strong the McLarens have been this season.
And I think, well, I mean, last year he won in Silverstone, and he only also won because McLaren fudged the strategy, because otherwise it would have been most likely either Oscar's or Orlando's win last year. So you would have had to kind of like hope for something like that.
Yes.
I think I think it would be quote unquote a little bit delusional to think like, oh, the Ferrari is in a place where they could race the McLaren. I don't think there's any car.
No, but I thought maybe a podium would have been potentially, depending on how things fell, of course, in the cards. But do we want to go over the starting grid first before we go into the actual race?
Yeah, I just wanted to also point out that I thought, of course, like Max getting the pole was like very, very impressive, because like it is a car that we all know is like just very unstable. It's not where it needs to be. It's not where he needs it to be. But then for him to pull this lap out of his hat that he was like a 10th faster.
I like how you worded it. I was thinking you were going a different direction.
Oh, no. Or out of his helmet, I guess.
Yeah.
He was a 10th faster than the McLaren in second place. So it is very, very impressive.
100% agree.
However, later on, so he opted for a low downforce setup, right? So
yeah,
that
both Red Bulls had a lower downforce.
So that means you're gonna be, because this Silverstone is a fast track, so that means that you're gonna have a lot more speed on the straights and then the high speed corners. However, of course, that ends up not really working in his favor when we're about to start talking about the race. But yes, the starting grid was Max in P1,
yes,
followed by the two McLarens, Oscar Piastri in P2 and Lando Norris in P3, followed by George Russell in the Mercedes. Then we had the two Ferraris, Lewis in 5th and Charles in 6th place. Then really, really cool, Fernando Alonso up in 7th place, and then really also a standout performance this whole weekend, Pierre Gasly in 8th.
Yes.
And a car that I think we all know is not the best.
Yeah.
Really. It does help that Pierre obviously has a lot of experience, and I think that's why he also outshined all of his teammates that he had this year. You know, if you have your rookies in a car that is not, you know, performing where it needs to be.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, he has been in the Alpine car for a long time, so he knows even if it's not where it needs to be, he's still the most familiar with it, like you said. So it does make a difference.
Absolutely.
Because it does take, I mean, from what it sounds like, it must take quite an adjustment to move from from one team to another, to adjust from one car to another, which makes sense because it's built differently. It's a different vehicle. They're not the same things.
Yeah, and it's also, I've seen people also like really get on like Carlos's case and then of course on Lewis for like, oh, they're not doing so well in the car, but it's like you have to understand these cars are built around a certain driver and around their certain driving style. That's also what you see in a Red Bull, and that's first of all something you have to adjust, and then it also doesn't help then if the car is not where it needs to be. So then you're just battling with a car that is not like, if this would be like a car that would be like perfect, like it's like able to compete with the McLarens and it doesn't have any issues, then I would like be like, okay, let's talk about it. But I think at this point it's just like, listen, you have to get used to this, you know?
Yeah, but it's also like they don't have unlimited time in the car.
No, they don't.
To get used to it. They have these couple of test sessions before the season, and of course they have the free practice session qualifying and things for each race. But it's not all the time in the world, or that they would like to spend in the car to really get a feel for it. And then again, it's also very different from track to track.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I mean, the surface is different, the track is different, the weather is different, the temperature is different. All those things have an impact on the driving. So it makes a difference. But anyways, let's continue. So we have Carlos Sainz in 9th, Kimi Antonelli.
The person who actually qualified in P7, but did get a 3-place grid penalty for the crash in last race weekend where he crashed into Max Verstappen, is Kimi Antonelli.
Ah, yes, I forgot about that.
Yeah, because he did a 125.3, which would have put him in 7th place behind Charles. But then, he got that 3-place grid penalty. And then followed by Yuki in 11th, which it was kind of awesome to see him make it all the way at least to Q2. Yes, he missed Q3 by just a small margin, but you
like
know,
just
he's
the
doing
tiniest
better.
hair, you know? So, I mean, it's just like we've been saying all season, like the times that they put, especially qualifying, is so incredibly close this season. That makes it so much more exciting. Of course, going into Sunday for the Grand Prix, it's a little bit different because race pace versus qualifying is different. But it's just such a bummer that he missed it by such a small, tiny hair. But like you said, it's nice to see that he made it at least to the top of Q2. Then we have Isaac Hadjar in 12th, so Albon 13th, Ocon 14th, Lawson then unfortunately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, he did make it out of Q1. So he was 15th. And then we have Bortoleto, which was such a bummer because he had such a great.
But I think he was struggling all weekend. We had Bortoleto in 16th, followed by Stroll in 17th.
Yeah, but what I was going to say, Lawson didn't make it out of Q3. Q1, sorry, because he had qualified in 16th, but Ollie Behrman, who had qualified originally in 8th, also got a penalty because he had that spin out on the pit exit lane during qualifying. I knew there was something else with Ollie Behrman.
I remember seeing that.
Yes. So that's why he ended up starting in 18th behind Lance Stroll and then rounding out the top 20. with Nico Hülkenberg was unfortunately just in 19th. And then Colapinto, of course, because of his crash early in Q1, he ended up 20th. However, unfortunately, Colapinto didn't even start the race, which was just such a bummer. So it ended up just starting with 19 drivers, but not all 19 drivers ended up finishing the race.
No, not by a lot. So this was definitely due to the difficult conditions.
Yes.
So most of the drivers actually started on the intermediates, but after the warm-up lap, we had a few drivers already go into the pits. One of those was George Russell, then followed by Charles Leclerc. I think it was also Isaac Hadjar, and I think, was it Gabby too? I'm uncertain. But those three for sure went into the pits to go on slicks.
It was Gabriel, because he got the mediums, I think.
Exactly. So they went onto the slicks because they thought, we have 25 minutes until the rain is supposed to come in. However, the track was already wet from rain prior to that. So it was definitely a gamble. However, the gamble did not pay off for any of them because we ended up having a virtual safety car, an actual safety car for quite a while.
And then another safety car. I mean, it was also because I think it was a good gamble to take, just because they were also saying that the day previously, the wetness of the track dried up pretty quickly. So they were anticipating that maybe things will dry up quicker, so then it will be the right call. I mean, it's a risk. It's a risk no matter what. And they were hoping to forego a later actual full pit by getting onto the slicks earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, like you said, the track didn't dry up quite as fast as they wanted to, and it ended up not even drying up for everybody to get onto the slicks before the actual big rain came in around lap
25, 23 or something like that.
Was it that?
Yeah, because 25 minutes, a little bit over 1.5 minutes per lap. It's kind of hard to gauge because of the safety car.
Because of all the safety cars. Because I know around lap 19th, we had a bunch. That was already when the second safety car might have come out, or that was the first one.
No, so we had the first virtual safety car actually coming out directly in lap 1 because Liam Lawson, unfortunately, got into a crash with Ocon because they went 3 wide. There was, I think it was Yuki. It was Yuki, I think, on the inside. So Ocon didn't have any room to give.
I mean, he did back out as soon as he noticed that they were going 3 wide and Liam Lawson was turning in. So he tried to back out, but it was a little bit too late. And Liam was turning in quite a bit into the corner.
Expecting Ocon to taking the inside line, right? Not realizing because you already have limited view in the car, and then you're not going to be able to see who's next to the car that you're racing,
next
right?
And a smidgen behind it, too.
Exactly. So it's just really a series of unfortunate events. Yeah. So immediately he crashed out. Ocon, honestly, for the big shunt that Liam had, really surprising that he really walked away with limited damage. He didn't really even have to go into the pits.
Yeah.
Then
very surprising.
The next crash, and that caused the safety car, I believe, was then Gabriel Bortoleto crashed out in lap 3. He was on the medium tires. Yeah. And it's just it was already difficult conditions. So him being on the mediums, very difficult. And then it's also, I thought, I don't know if he called for it. I haven't checked that because Nico obviously didn't go for that strategy. Yeah. I thought it was very interesting that he did. And it's also in a way, I think it's a bigger gamble to have Gabriel take the slicks because you have a rookie driver, right? Whereas Nico or the other drivers are 15 years or whatever, how long. They have much more experience with an F1 car and also maybe racing in rain because you're just older, so you've had more opportunity. So obviously that didn't work out for Bortoleto, and he ended up crashing out. Fortunately, not really a big no, he did actually damage the backside of his car quite
he ended up damaging the wing, and he went through the gravel, so he was quite far from the racing line, but it took quite a good amount of effort to get him out or get the vehicle extracted, so that's why the virtual safety car ended up coming out.
And then we had in lap 17, we had a really, that's actually, it was already a lot of rain then, because that is when Isaac Hadjar hit Kimi Antonelli in the back. And you can already, if you see the clip online, like there was no visibility.
Yeah.
So
it's truly unbelievable during which conditions they drive. Because I was like, oh, why are they putting a safety car out? You know, it's just rain. But then when you really see the onboards, when they have the back spray from the car ahead of them, like they drive blind. Like obviously they know the track, they know what corner comes when, which turn goes where. But like they have no clue where the car in front of them is until they see the red lights in the back.
Yeah, and it's also like obviously when you have that much spray going into the car, because as a driver you're taking the markers on the side of the track obviously as indication when you're gonna brake.
Yes.
And like, can you even see them? I don't know if he did, because if you think about it, Kimi was quite a lot slower, right? So I don't even know if Isaac then missed his braking mark, but he really crashed hard into the back of Kimi Antonelli. Kimi Antonelli kept driving for a moment. He honestly saved that really, really well.
Yeah, he did a beautiful save. Isaac Hadjar unfortunately went into the wall.
Yeah.
So his car was he was immediately out.
Yeah.
Kimi Antonelli, like you said, there was, thank God for runoff areas in Silverstone.
Yeah.
Because that definitely saved also a lot of injuries potentially.
Yeah.
And also a lot more drivers ended up finishing the race because they were able to get the car back on track. But then, we had this moment where Kimi had spun out, but he was able to lock the car back in really quickly because he didn't touch the wall or anything.
Really great save.
Yeah, incredible save. He ended up rejoining, and it seemed like everything was fine. But then it turns out there was indeed more damage.
I think the back diffuser was completely disconnected.
Like it was gone.
Yeah, it was gone. And so in lap 23, he ended up having to retire the car.
Yes.
So that means by lap 23, we had a 5 DNFs and 1 Colapinto never started.
Yeah,
because
one
he had
DNS.
a DNS. Yeah, because he had a gear clutch issue.
Yeah.
So he wasn't, I guess the gear was getting stuck.
Yeah.
Really unfortunate he didn't even get to race.
Yeah, such a bummer. But I think the other very big one, we had some really nice battles on the track, although there was the rain. But then the really big controversial moment was during the second safety car restart.
Correct.
We had, at this moment, Piastri was leading the pack ahead of Max Verstappen, and Lando Norris was behind them. It was such a bummer also because Piastri was leading by a really strong amount ahead of the first safety car.
I think it was over 15 seconds.
I think it was around 15 seconds at the time, yeah. So it's just like, it was in crazy rain conditions. He was driving out this incredible lead. Then the safety car comes out. It's racing. That's what happens. So they all get bunched together again. The first restart, which also F1 TV, we barely saw the restart because they didn't switch over from the replay. And I think the commentator was also getting not necessarily frustrated with it, but he was like, switch to the restart because like he was insinuating that we're gonna miss it if you don't switch it now, which we ended up doing. We ended up missing it.
Yeah, because when they switched it over, they had already started racing, which I think maybe there was like a second or two, but like over and over again, F1 TV has been dropping.
Especially this season.
This season has been really bad about there.
Yeah.
Like we don't see people winning races. We don't see people also like there's been a couple times now there have been battles on the last lap and we are not seeing that.
Yes.
And I'm like, what are we doing, dude?
Yeah. So it's really frustrating. But anyways, so the group was bunched together for the second restart. The safety car lights went out pretty late, but they went out because the safety car was leaving. So then Piastri slowed down the car. He did brake quite aggressively. I think Max maybe didn't anticipate it, so he ended up doing an avoiding action past Piastri and then had to wait for Piastri to pass him. The stewards ended up reviewing the incident, and they ended up giving him a 10-second penalty. I think, and I'm not the only one that believes so, I think, is that there was a very harsh penalty. I do agree that his braking was quite aggressive. I do understand that you brake once the safety car's light goes out so you can create some space between. So then you have the space to accelerate and then do your restart. his braking at that moment was quite aggressive, especially for the conditions that they were in. But I think a 10-second penalty, I understand the whole thing that they just made the regulations that it's 10s, that they decided that it would be 10 or whatever. But I think it is incredibly aggressive because I know what you're thinking is that, of course, I'm pro Piastri. That's why I'm more upset about the penalty.
I'm not really thinking that. Well, finish your sentence and then I'll give my 2 cents about it.
Well, I think it was too harsh for what it was. Part of me wants to argue because also nothing happened, that like it didn't affect anybody outside of Max passing him, you know? And of course, Max had the spin that happened afterwards, but it had nothing to do with Piastri braking. Like maybe Max wasn't focused or whatever, but that is a Max problem. That is not something that was inflicted by Oscar Piastri in that moment.
And as far as I know, we never heard anything that Max insinuated that this was. I'm just also setting it clear that there's nothing that I've heard or read that Max said, oh, like because of this I spun.
Yeah, no, I think Julian Palmer had insinuated that potentially that
Max was unfocused because of that.
Well, that one, and then two was like maybe that informed the stewards' decision a little bit. Although they
influenced.
Exactly. Yeah. Although they always claim that the outcome,
which we know is not true.
Which is not true, of course. That's why I'm just prefacing what I'm saying. They say that the outcome doesn't impact their decision
on a penalty.
But yeah, I just think a 10-second penalty is incredibly harsh. For something like this, because there was no damage, there was nothing that happened, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying is, but then you are like essentially arguing like there's no outcome to his aggressive thing, which is they're saying we don't look at it, we're looking at what you did, which is erratic driving.
Which is not always true.
My thought process is that. So I've read online, obviously, like Zach Brown is like, this is crazy. This is, and the thing about it is, because Piastri had to pit again, the 10-second penalty had to be served during the pit stop.
Yes.
So that means that they can't even fight it. Yeah. If it would have happened afterwards and the penalty would have been applied, you could have maybe then argued with the stewards. But at this point, it's already happened.
But then also the question is, would they fight it if their other driver won the British Grand Prix, and you know it is his dream to win the British Grand Prix?
I think you would, in my opinion, because this is also sets precedent, right?
No, I hear what you're saying, but I think it's a very difficult position for the team to be in.
I get it, but
I
think maybe if, like, let's say Lando would like be determined whether or not he would be getting an edge on someone else, like Max Verstappen on the championship, but because it's within themselves, I think for team balance and peace, you would probably be like, hey, why are we getting a penalty for this? I will say I also read that Jenson Button said that because of the conditions, he got a penalty more, and if the conditions, and he would have done this in like clear conditions, sunshine, he would have not, because I think also the problem is that maybe because of the conditions, Max didn't see it, right? Because it happened on a straight. And I
would argue, just very quickly, there was no spray during that part because they were not driving at the speed. So like Max would have seen it. Yeah,
that's true actually.
So that's why I don't think that argument necessarily, in my opinion, is valid.
Yeah.
But continue.
But I don't have any data on how this penalty has been applied in previous incidences. So I can't really say whether or not, I think for the championship it's good, you know, but this is not why someone should get a penalty. For me, however, I don't think a 10-second penalty in general is bad, because we coming from an era where people get 5-second penalties and then they're like, well, I'm just going to take the 5-second penalty because I can drive out a big enough lead where it doesn't impact me. And this is the type of thing that we don't want, right? We don't people just be like, I'm just going to accept it. I'm going to cut the corner, get the 5-second penalty, and then c'est la vie, right? We want it to be a punishment, the 10-second penalty. I get that Oscar, that this is a very controversial way, but because it's either 10-second or no penalty, I'm not saying he deserves it. I'm just saying, like, I'm not pro 5 seconds.
I hear what you're saying, And I don't think, especially looking at last season, I don't think you're necessarily wrong. But I also think I'm having such a hard time with this. I don't think it. I just think 10 seconds was too much, for something like this. And I also think that a 10-second penalty, like it doesn't apply for this now specifically, but a 10-second penalty has a much bigger impact on any of the driving teams or drivers in the midfield that it has for like a McLaren team outside of like this scenario right now, because McLaren is easily very often 10 seconds ahead and like they could have gotten another 10-second penalty, 2 10-second penalties, and would have not made an impact for that team specifically. But then for any other team or a lot of the other teams in the midfield, a 10-second penalty costs them, it's a lot more expensive. I mean, it's a tricky thing to adjust the penalties that way. And I don't know if there's a different way to adjust it, to make it like create a formula to make it relative to timing and things like that. But that's also
because the penalty is not supposed to determine the outcome of the race, right? Because if
I completely understand that, but I think just pace wise and things, that was the argument I feel like last year too. Like a 5-second penalty didn't make that much of an impact for like the faster teams. Like, because Max Verstappen, when he got a 5-second penalty, often he was just able to drive it out. So I think that's my argument. Like, it doesn't apply to today's conversation necessarily, but I'm just saying like a 10-second penalty has a different repercussion or value or I don't know what the word is for for a top team versus any other team.
Yeah, I mean, we are obviously in a year where that grid has never been closer.
Yes.
However, I'm still thinking that, like, I think the bigger problem is the inconsistency, the way penalties
100%.
are applied, because we had this race, we had an situation where there was contact between Charles and Sainz, and Charles didn't get a penalty.
Well, I don't think there was contact.
I thought Charles said, because but it's okay.
Because,
so maybe there wasn't
Carlos
contact,
took avoiding action,
and then he picked a penalty. But there's no penalty for Charles. But it's like you're driving erratic and you're causing something. You're not getting a penalty for that.
That's what
I think the inconsistency, the way penalties are applied, are a bigger problem than itself. Because in my opinion, if you really did something, a 10-second penalty should hurt.
Yes.
You should get punished for it. And if that means you're going to drop 3 positions, then you should have driven better.
I know, and I completely agree with that. Like, if you've done something, then you should feel it. It should have repercussions on your current race and maybe even on the championship. But then the thing is, like, it is inconsistent, because we also had an incident between was it Yuki and Ollie Behrman? And then in that moment, they ended up getting together. But it was, I don't think, because Yuki ended up getting a 10-second penalty for it. Yes, there was contact, but Yuki didn't have anywhere to go. Like, from the point of view that we were shown, I thought that was not a correct punishment either. I don't know if there's a different camera angle. If you guys have seen it, let me know if I'm incorrect in my assessment. But I feel like Yuki shouldn't have gotten that 10-second penalty. And then I think it's also the thing of, 1, they're inconsistent, and then 2 is it depends on who gets the penalty. That adds to their inconsistency. If it's like this certain teams or certain drivers, or I wonder if it's still a thing of like, let's make it interesting, which I hope is not a thing, because that was the whole thing with the World Championship versus Max Lewis years ago. But it's just really frustrating. And then it does hurt a little bit for me, it hurts the fan experience a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. I think, once again, I think the Oscar Piastri one, it's like, I don't want to say it is what it is, but it kind of is. But I think
we can't change it anymore, so it is what it is.
But I think, because I also, once again, like, I cannot gauge whether or not this was harsh or not, because we had a similar situation with Russell and Verstappen. Was it last race in Canada?
Yeah.
And however, that one wasn't nearly as egregious. But also Russell wasn't braking as aggressively as Piastri had. I understand this was also a combination of where the safety car lights went out so late.
Yes.
And according to Piastri, and I give him the benefit of the doubt, I have to check it myself. The lights went off and he braked.
Yeah.
And if the stewards can see that, if the lights went out and he braked, then I'm like, well, he's trying to kind of make up for you guys turning off the lights so late, right? But
that's my argument. But anyways, it is what it is now. It's a little frustrating, and I'm sure there's so much discourse about this online.
Yeah.
Already happening. But there's a couple more things that we probably want to talk about.
There's a lot more. I will say, however, this also ended in Piastri probably being the most upset we've ever seen him.
100%. He was livid.
Yeah.
He barely spoke in his post-race interview with Jenson Button. Like, he didn't want to say anything about the incident. He just said, like,
it's also like you run a risk that you'll get penalized.
And that's literally what he said.
$10,000.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want to say anything now because I might get in trouble, which I
pound.
understand, and also good for you. You don't have to say anything about it. And
like yell it out in the wherever at home or whatever, right?
Exactly.
But you also don't want to feed into this narrative. But yeah.
Yes. But then so there was this, I mean, of course, always during a rain race or a mixed weather race, there's lots of surprises that happened. I mean, I remember specifically Brazil last year when we had the two Alpines all of a sudden on the podium with Max. I mean, what a race that was. So going into, or then starting up the race and it being a rain race, I was having some expectations that it would be something interesting.
Yes, because at some point we had Lance Stroll on a podium position in P3, which... I'm going to be super toxic. This is probably, I said it to you.
Yeah.
It's true. This is probably the only driver on the grid who I'm like, I don't want to see you on a podium, right? Because I just think
it's
like...
so mean, but I do agree with it.
He has already had a F1 podium.
He's had like 4 podiums,
Yeah, so he's already gotten his flowers. But it's just like you're not performing in the way that you could.
Yeah.
And I think there's obviously talks about that second Aston Martin seat. But in the end, I think Alonso should stay and you should go, dude.
Yeah.
Because that's just what it is. But as long as Daddy owns the team, it's probably not going to happen. And it's frustrating.
And it's so the really interesting thing was who was fighting him for the 3rd position. So it ended up being 2 people really up for that position. So it was Lance Stroll, and then it was behind him fighting for potentially 3rd place.
Pride of Germany.
The pride of Germany right now on the grid, Nico Hülkenberg. I was like...
Legend.
I couldn't believe it when I saw him in 4th. I think it took me quite a minute to realize that he was...
I also thought for the longest time, I was like, oh, so he's probably out of pit cycle.
Yeah.
And he must have pit less. Obviously, he pitted less than everyone else, right?
Yeah.
Because he literally started in 19th place, so last place today, right? Because there was no 20th.
Yeah.
And then...
Granted, because of the people who ended up switching tires after the warm-up lap, there were several drivers that ended up starting through the pit lane, but that was their decision.
Yeah.
But he had, on the starting grid officially, he started in 19th. And then all of a sudden, we saw him up in 4th. And it was like, what is going on? What world is this? And Nico Hülkenberg, who had never placed on a podium in Formula One in his 239 Grand Prix that he participated in, he had retired years ago until he came back. I think you said due to Vettel.
Yeah.
Originally.
Vettel had COVID at the beginning of the 2022 season. So then he was like, hey, put Nico on the car. He did, I think, 2 or 3 races for him. Did actually really, really well.
With Ferrari then?
Well, with Aston Martin.
That was with Aston Martin. Yes.
And then the following year, he got a contract with Haas.
Yes. And of course, we know that he's been struggling.
And to be honest, like going into this year when I heard that he signed with Sauber, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I get he's signing with Sauber because it will be the Audi team. But I was like, literally, the only team that didn't score a point last year was Kick Sauber. They were nowhere. The car was slow.
Yes.
But time and again, his experience, he is like last race. He also started from the back markers and he made it into the points, right? Then we have also Gabi now made it on in Bortoleto. Made it into the points last race.
Last race.
So it's like the Sauber team really has.
They're getting their shit together and things are getting better for them.
The pit stops there's night and day between it.
Oh, yes.
Remember last year it was like on average was a
brutal.
6-second pit stop
Yeah,
for
so
a while.
no, they've been really making some excellent improvements. And then so yeah, seeing Nico in fourth place, it was a little bit, I think there was like 4 or 5 seconds distant when I had seen him, or when I really realized that he was there. And then so he was trying to make up spots to get to, because he had passed Gasly. And then he needed to make up quite a distance to Lance Stroll, so he had some free air, clean air, and he was driving, and I was like, oh my God, is today the race where Nico Hülkenberg is going to be on the podium in a kick Sauber?
Yeah, and I will say part of me also felt like really like twisted about it, or like unsure, because like we had then at some point Nico passed Stroll, and then Lewis, who was behind him, also passed Stroll. So then we had Lewis Hamilton, who have been waiting for him to get on a main race onto the podium, who has also had this 13 years of
podium streaks
at Silverstone. But then it's like this person who, like, the chances of you making onto the podium again anytime soon are very, very slim. You know? So it's like, and of course he's German, right? Driving for Swiss team?
Yes, that's a Swiss team.
That will be German next year?
I think so. I mean, Audi is a German car company, so I don't know how that transitions.
Technicality of
but
that
yeah,
is.
so I agree with you. I definitely had moments of conflict, because going into it, I was hoping Lewis would have a good race, of course. I mean, I always root for Lewis.
Yeah.
But I think Silverstone was maybe the race that he could have done really well. But then Nico having maybe his very first podium ever in Formula One, which is such a huge feat. I mean, especially
because a lot of people never get one.
100%. So many people don't ever get one. So it was like, it was conflicting, but I ended up rooting a little bit more for Nico, because I was like, this would be just such a moment for him, you know? And then we had one more pit to go through, because the track was getting a lot drier. So then it was a matter of deciding when to go in to switch onto slicks. When is it time? There's several people who went a little bit too early.
I think iconically,
George Russell
was like, hey, should we should we like risk something?
Yes.
And then his race engineer was like, no, we're not suicidal.
Yes.
We like risk, but we're not suicidal.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, before we get back into this, what I thought was really interesting, then I think a lap later or 2 laps later, Russell called it himself. He was like, I want to pit, right? They call him into the pits. But again, they put him on the hards.
Yes.
So in the beginning when they switched, he was the only one who was on hard tire, where everyone else was either on a medium or soft. And then again, they put him on the hard tire, which I thought was a very interesting choice, because the hard tire obviously also being the tire that will take the longest to warm up.
Yes.
To get into the right window on a track that is already cooler.
Cold. Yeah.
You know? So I thought it was a very interesting choice to put him. And then he comes out of the pits and immediately spins out.
Yes.
And also, this just really shows the amount of spin-outs that we had, and people who actually were able to rejoin because they didn't hit the wall.
Yes.
It's just shows why there should be more track races and not fucking street races.
Agreed. So, but yeah, there were a couple people who went in a little bit too early, including Lewis Hamilton, or Alonso went in. He was the very first one to switch onto the slicks. He was
definitely like 4 or 5 laps too early.
Yeah, he was definitely too early. And then Lewis Hamilton went also just like a lap or 2, maybe too early, because he ended up losing, because he was in DRS behind Nico Hülkenberg at the time. And then he ended up going into the pits first. Nico, I think, stayed out for like 2 more laps.
Yeah.
And then in those 2 laps, 1 or 2 laps, Hamilton had also went off the track. He got onto the softs.
Yeah. Which I honestly don't think was a bad call.
No.
I think
the
it would have
softs
been a
was
better
good
call if it was 2 laps later.
Yes.
Because the softs obviously fall off so quickly.
Yes.
And you didn't have that many laps left, but I think, I genuinely think if you would have maybe pitted Lewis 2 laps later, he might have been able to catch him.
Yes, I agree. I don't think it's because of the tire temperature necessarily. I just think because of the conditions
wetness,
still.
Of the track, yeah.
So I think, a lap, maybe 2, would have definitely helped him. But then, so we had Norris take his home Grand Prix, the Silverstone Grand Prix. It was his dream ever since he was a child. Understandable.
Yeah.
You're a British driver. You want to win at home.
Yeah.
So he ended up doing that. Piastri came in second, about 6.812 seconds behind. And then in third place, for the very first time on an F1 podium, is Nico Hülkenberg in a kick Sauber. My eyes are getting watery again because it's such a great moment. And I was so happy for the Sauber team and seeing them celebrate. I mean, they were
chanting Nico.
They were drowning out the Lando chants in like the park farm essentially. So it was a little funny, and Nico also got on top of the car and was just like celebrating.
Yeah, of course.
Because why the hell not?
Yeah,
and I that's what we love about MotoGP. Them hearing them celebrate, and also Lando hearing him over the radio. He was so
I feel like
ecstatic.
This was Lando's biggest celebration. He celebrated bigger than when he won the first time last year in Miami. And I mean, I know that he said he would trade all of his wins for a win in Silverstone.
Yes.
Which I get. It means so much to win at home.
Yeah.
But it was just such a beautiful moment, and I thought it was quite funny. It seemed like the right side of the podium ceremony was like all sunshine and rainbows, and then the left side on the second place where Oscar was, it was just like a huge storm cloud.
It was like Silverstone.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was so exciting to have Nico up there, and I loved also his post-race interview. Yeah, he was like, "Yeah, I knew I could do it. It was just a matter of time."
Yeah.
You know, so confident but not cocky.
I thought it was sarcasm.
No, I don't think so.
I read it as a very dry German humor.
Oh, I didn't think so. Because I believe he knows he's a good, excellent racing driver. It was just a matter of time or a matter of being in the right machinery and things
like
working.
He's always been in midfield cars, right? So
exactly.
in midfield cars, like everything has to align for you to make it onto the podium, and it's so excited for him.
Maybe he was manifesting it.
Yeah, and the Sauber team, I think it would have been. The only thing that would have made it better is if his wife and his daughter would have been there.
Do they have 2 kids? I think they have 2 kids.
Oh, I don't know, because in the post race,
I only saw that with sort of one, but I thought I had seen like an arm.
No,
or something.
I mean when he was talking about it later on, because Oscar Piastri, he was kind of like poking fun at, because I think only Lando got an actual trophy, and the other 2 only got the Lego trophies, which he like. People were saying like, oh, Oscar's being a jerk, but Oscar was like, hey, he was when they're sitting on the couch and they're interviewed, he was like, I have a question for Nico. How does it feel after 15 years getting your first podium and you get a trophy made out of Lego? And people were like, oh, he's being a dick to Nico, but he's making a point towards the FIA.
Yeah.
Because he was like, that you can probably buy next week.
Yes.
And it's like, I get it. Like, dude, like get everyone a Lego trophy, sure.
But I think that's a fun idea, but you should get a proper trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Nico was like, "Oh, I love Lego, and I'm sure my daughter will like playing with it."
Yes.
So that's why I thought he only had one child.
Oh, gotcha. So maybe I was wrong.
Who knows?
But it was also like there was just so many cute and fun celebration moments. Of course, we had Gabriele Bortoletto over the phone, not over the phone, over the radio.
He ringed it in.
Congratulating him, which was really nice. Then I saw a video that the Mercedes team had sent Sauber some champagne bottles to celebrate, and of course they were just partying and celebrating.
Yeah, you have to.
There's a video of Nico's wife filming their daughter watching dad win on the TV screen and celebrating, and you can hear faintly in the background, you can hear the wife sob a little bit, which is just so beautiful. And yeah, it's a bummer that they weren't there.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, how would you know?
Yeah, of course.
And but yeah,
especially the way qualifying went, he didn't even make it out of Q1.
I mean, he was 19th. Yeah. So but I mean, so happy for him. What an excellent result.
All right, guys, we unfortunately ran out of space on our hard drive, but we fixed it. So anyways, big congratulations to Nico.
Yes.
What a race. I will let's talk about, I think, because I think we said enough about the race. Or is there anything else you want to say about the race?
No, I mean,
hang on. Sorry, the last thing I want to say about the race is that I think besides Nico, I think who would have been a really great contender for driver of the day would have been Pierre Gasly.
Oh, yes.
The defending that he did in a car that is inferior to many, many other cars, he kept George Russell behind him for laps on laps on laps. George was never able to overtake him. Lewis was able to make it past him, but then also for a long time he fought against Max. He kept him behind. So what a really, really big drive from him. He also said it in his post-race interview that he couldn't believe he was racing Lewis, he was racing Max, he was racing against George.
Yes.
And what a huge feat coming from someone who drives in a car that is not very good. But I also always think that like I would love to see Gasly in a car that can go, you
Yes.
know, because he is like one of those drivers that are always in a midfield car.
I mean, he was very briefly too soon though in a Red Bull.
Yeah, I mean,
and
Red Bull burned him like they did with so many with
so many.
Albon, right? There's so many, right, that they burned. I mean, I also feel like incredibly really bad for Yuki because like I think people are realizing now that it's the car and it's not the other driver.
Yeah.
But it's like they're all are talking about like maybe Hajar going into the car.
No,
and
don't put him in there. It's too soon and it's just
like
gonna hurt him.
But it's like it's also like I would have liked for Yuki to be in the car when the car was actually
good
and drivable.
Yeah.
Drivable for other people.
I mean, but Max can barely drive it. He's complaining about it constantly, and it's built for him. You know?
At some point, and then they engineered it into the ground.
Yeah,
it seems like it.
But anyways, I think it was a fun Grand Prix.
It was awesome.
Lots of action.
And then our friend, because we have like a friends group that all watch F1, she also said that it's like if people are coming from watching the Formula One movie and then watching this race for the very first time, they get a very disillusioned view of what an F1 race is because they're not.
Very
we
true.
have a lot of good races, but we also have sometimes races where nothing happens.
Yeah, or no safety cars or things like that.
Or specifically this, because we had so many spin outs.
Yes.
We had so many. And my lament about the F1 movie was like, always spinning out and always this, and always crashing and stuff like that. And this doesn't happen very often.
Maybe this was a promo for the movie.
Yeah, they're like, watch this, stupido.
But yes. So next up, we have the Belgium Grand Prix in Spa is coming back.
At the end of July.
Yeah, so we do have, I think it's 2 weeks off. Yeah, because it comes on the 25th through 27th of July is that race weekend. So we have some time to process what happened this weekend. Very quickly, in terms of driver standings, Oscar Piastri is still leading the overall driver championship by 8 points ahead of Lando Norris, and then several points behind is Max Verstappen. So I think at this point it's mostly between Lando and Oscar.
We're exactly halfway through the season.
Okay.
But like the McLaren car would have to implode for this to not be between the McLaren drivers.
Yes, and then just very quickly, now in 9th is Nico Hülkenberg with
Mad
37 points. Hell yes. Love it. But anyway, so let's move on.